The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Kevin, it's a distinct pleasure.
Well, it's my distinct pleasure to have you on.
Well, we're both distinctly pleased.
We are indeed. We are indeed. Gosh, you've been doing this for so many years, and I say you've been doing this. You've been covering so many alternative subjects in this field. How did this all start for you? What got you into the alternative field?
Well, I got started in journalism actually way early, even in junior high school. As a teenager, I was working on the little school paper, which at that point in time was done on a mimeograph machine. Most people today don't even remember what a mimeograph machine is. And but I would draw cartoons and I'd write little stories. And then when I got to high school, same thing, worked on the school paper, wrote stories, took photographs, did my own photography, developed my own film, drew cartoons, did a little bit of everything, and that just evolved straight on into my professional news career, working for a variety of Texas newspapers. I won awards for photography, I won awards for my cartoons, and won awards for my stories, and I just was kind of a jack of all trades. The thing that put me into the more unconventional stories was the fact that they were rarely covered in the conventional media. In other words, if say I was sitting at my desk in the newspaper and somebody ran in and ran up there and said, "Hey, a UFO landed in the park across the street," and then ran out, my desk companions, other reporters, they go, "Boy, that guy was a nut," and they just go back to doing what they were doing. Me, I'd at least get up and go look out the window. I want to know, is there anything to all this? And what I found out was there were so many things, stories that I've covered, like who really killed John Kennedy, who was really behind 9/11, what's the truth about did we go to the moon or not? All of these various issues and controversies and conspiracies. I found that usually there is some substance there. There's something to warrant further investigation.
That is for sure. So what was your first case then? What was your first sort of alternative case?
Well, I suppose I cut my teeth on the Kennedy assassination because it happened right there in my own backyard. I was a sophomore at University of Texas. I'm at North Texas. It's now called the University of North Texas, yeah. And so, I knew this was a big story. I'd been to Dallas. I'd even met Jack Ruby. I'd been in Jack Ruby's club. I have a photograph of me as a college kid dancing on the stage of Jack Ruby's Carousel Club. And so I knew the participants. I knew what was going on in Dallas. I knew who ran Dallas. And so to me, this was a huge case, and I was on it pretty much from the beginning, and I'm still picking up information about that.
Wow, yeah, that's right. Because your book was based on the Oliver Stone movie, the JFK movie. Have I got that right?
Well, it was a basis, one of the books that he used for his film JFK. And I don't know if you wanted to get into that, but I'll just leave you and your audience with this. The Oliver Stone's film JFK, you really need to watch that, because I'm not going to try to tell you that it's 100% ground truth, but it's the closest to the truth that the American public has been given.
That's incredible. And did you get to meet Oliver Stone?
Oh yes, I worked pretty closely with him, both on the script and then some on the production.
Do you know what? That's a great movie. I think I have it on Blu-ray, and it really is a fantastic movie to myself. It's yeah, that always got me going.
Well, it's fantastic. It's fantastic that he was able to get so much information into this, 2+ hour movie. You do some editing yourself, so you'd appreciate this. As I understand it, he shot over 1,000 hours of film, and then edited it into this two and a half, whatever it was, a little over 2 hours, I think, movie. That's some real creative editing.
Yeah, what a case to cover. I mean, yeah. Why is that? Why is the JFK assassination important nowadays still, do you think?
Well, it's important because it changed the whole course of U.S. history. It's also interesting to so many people because at the very bottom of it, we're talking about a murder mystery. And, Agatha Christie and, Perot and all these murder mystery, they sold millions of copies of murder mystery books, and everybody likes a good murder mystery, and this is probably one of the biggest ones going. And it's still not totally solved. I mean, it kind of is. If you study everything that's now available about the Kennedy assassination, you'll know exactly what happened. And what happened was simply that we had a coup d'etat in the United States in 1963. And coup d'etat, a French term, of course, and it means literally that a change of government to a violent act. That's exactly what happened. And the government changed. We went into Vietnam. We could quit prosecuting the mafia. The oil men got to keep their oil depletion allowance. The corporations grew stronger and more powerful, and et cetera, et cetera. So we had a complete sea change in the course of United States history. That's why it's important.
That's so true. And yeah.
And also today there's controversies and conspiracies going on today, but sometimes they're hard to delve into and hard to peel back the layers of deceit and manipulation and lies and everything else. With the Kennedy assassination, that has happened now. It's been 53 years ago or whatever. Now it's things have cooled off enough. There's enough information out there that the diligent investigator can actually dig into and find out what this conspiracy was all about and how it worked. And then that leads you on to understanding more recent ones.
Sure, but aren't some of the records on the JFK assassination still sealed, aren't they? Yeah.
Yes, that's true. And a lot of others have been destroyed all along the way. The one that really gets me is the Secret Service. When after the Oliver Stone movie, the Congress created the Assassination Records Review Board, and they were mandated to go into all of the agencies of the government and dig out any materials that were pertinent to that period of time and to the Kennedy assassination. And so when they went to the Secret Service, they found out that a lot of the records pertaining to that day had been destroyed. But they'd been destroyed after the creation of the Assassination Records Review Board, and when they knew that they were going to be coming after those records. So, in any other criminal case, this would be pretty good evidence of complicity.
Well, do you think the truth
guilt
will ever come out?
Well, the truth's out now. It's already there. It was a coup d'etat with Lyndon Johnson, J. Edgar Hoover at the top of the pile, directing the cover-up. I don't think it'll ever be proved that Johnson or Hoover ordered or authorized the assassination. But what can be proved in a court of law beyond any reasonable doubt, as they say, is that those two men participated in covering up the truth of the assassination. Well, under our legal system, that makes them accessories after the fact. And under the law, an accessory after the fact is considered just as guilty as the person that pulled the trigger.
Yeah, that's so true. Do you see any parallels in the JFK assassination and the Trump movement right now as well in America?
Oh, absolutely. Because see, I lived through it all, and I want to tell you something. Especially down here in the South and in Texas, people did not like John Kennedy. Okay. I heard people that very day when they said he'd been assassinated, there's a lot of people mumbling good because they felt like he was soft on communism. They felt like he was soft on a lot of other areas, and that he was too liberal and blah blah blah. And so you know now what at least half the country today feels like Barack Obama is a failure as a president, and and so now multiply that feeling by a factor of about 10, and that's what a lot of people felt towards JFK. That's why they were able to get away with his murder, because a good portion of the country kind of to themselves said, well, maybe this is a good thing.
Well, America is definitely going through a major shift right now with the Trump administration. That is for sure. That's sure. That's
true. And we're just going to have to kind of wait and see what happens. I have a lot of serious reservations about Trump, but on the other hand, he is certainly preferable to the Clinton crime family. And so we're just going to have to wait and see. And what I'll tell you and your listeners and everybody else is we've got to wait till about, he hasn't even taken office yet. So let's give the guy a break and wait till about late April or May. Okay, by then we'll be able to see what he's actually doing. And that's another thing. Don't listen to anything he says, and don't listen to anything the mass media says. I think they've proven themselves to be at best out of touch, and at worst, totally one-sided. I mean, they were telling us Hillary's going to win, and just browbeat everybody into that, and it turned out it didn't work that way. So they're obviously not in the loop. So don't listen to the mass media. Don't even listen to Trump. But watch what he does. Watch who he appoints. Watch what happens to the people once his appointees get into office. See if he follows through on any of those campaign promises. And so by April or May, we'll probably be able to get a more clear picture on what we have here, which is either maybe a definite slowdown in this country's march towards a socialist New World Order, or just a kind of more of the same.
Well, we're definitely living in interesting times right now, that's for sure. Yeah,
that's true.
I mean, you must be very proud when you see the JFK movie in the video stores sometimes. For what video stores are left, it's all online nowadays. But to have been part of that.
yeah. I'm not sure there's any left. Because it was. I was very pleased to get my book out because being a Texas reporter, I had been in contact with a lot of the serious JFK researchers in Texas, especially in the Dallas area. And they had all this information that was not reaching the public, okay? And that's why in 1976 I was asked to teach a course on the Kennedy assassination at the University of Texas at Arlington, which is in between Dallas and Fort Worth. And I did that for 30 years. And from the very beginning to the very end, the conclusion was this was a coup d'etat with a major change of government through the assassination of President Kennedy. And so far to this very day, that particular premise is held up.
Wow, your classes must have been pretty interesting, man. Okay.
Oh, they were great. What's really interesting, Kevin, is I got to noticing I was getting a lot of police officers and lawyers, and city, county officials were coming to take my course, and I was going, gee, what's that all about? And then I finally realized it's because they knew the law, they knew the legal system, they knew police investigations, they knew how things were supposed to work, and they could see clearly that none of that worked in the Kennedy assassination. They illegally took his body out of Texas. There was no coroner's investigation. The autopsy was botched. I mean, everything that should have happened in just your normal street crime case did not happen in the Kennedy case. That again points to high-level control and manipulation.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. You know, I'm sure a lot of people look up to in the sense of, you know, I'd like to do what Jim's doing, you know, to do these types of investigations and live that life. And I'm guessing that, you know, when the film came along and, you know, and obviously you had your university teaching background as well, to support you as well. But I'm guessing when the film came along, that helped you a lot to keep going and keep your investigations into different anomalies open as well.
Well, yes, but then all that did was just move me along the path. With the success of my book Crossfire, Plot That Killed Kennedy, and the subsequent movie by Oliver Stone, I would ask all around the country as I traveled, you know, what do you think's the next big, deep, dark, secret government cover-up? And almost unanimously, from everyone from publishers to cab drivers, I would get, we want to know what's the truth about UFOs. So I immediately began to dig in on that, and that resulted in my 1997, I believe, book, Alien Agenda. What is the Alien Agenda? And that book, by the way, I have been told, has become the top-selling nonfiction book on UFOs in the world, because it's been translated into about a dozen languages.
Yes, I remember seeing that book in my library, or I think, or maybe a bookstore it was, and I did get it and I read it. It's a fantastic read. This was way before I got into, you know, my talk show. So yeah, it's still, you know, we'll put it up on the screen now as we speak as well. It's a great book.
Yeah. And that one, in the process of investigating UFOs, I stumbled across the fact that the U.S. military was studying, experimenting with, and operationally using the psychic ability remote viewing. And so that led to a book I wrote called Psi-Spies, P-S-I, Spies, Psychic Spies, Psi-Spies. And that was a fascinating thing because, you know, going into it, here the idea is that the U.S. Army had a whole unit, a top secret unit, and they weren't telling everybody about, that were using the psychic ability, which is essentially clairvoyance, we used to call clairvoyance, which is they would sit at their little desk or their chairs or sit outside and cast their mind to other places on the world, and were able to envision things and perceive people, places, and things without the normal five senses. And of course, that was psychic ability. And going into it, I thought, you know, this is wild. I said, this is going to be a hot subject. I said, because it's either true or it's not true. If it's not true, which was my inclination, having been brought up in the science-based education system, you know, I thought, well, this can't be real. You know, I said, and if it's not, then what a great story. What a waste of taxpayer money, you know, going to fund these military psychics. On the other hand, if it turns out to be true, which it did, then it's like, holy cow, this is really a story, because this is a evolutionary step from mankind.
Yeah, no, definitely, man, definitely. Just before we get into those subjects, right, what is your most favorite subject that you covered, that you investigated?
Well, it's an interesting subject. I guess it would have to be the idea of space aliens, which again, going into it, I thought there was, you know, lots of. You got to understand that I'm old enough to go back to when we were being told that there was no such things as UFOs. They were just hallucinations, or perhaps some sort of mass psychosis.
Of course.
And as a young journalist, I thought, wow, there's a story, a heretofore undiagnosed contagious mass psychosis, you know. But it turned out that wasn't true, and of course it's not true now. Nobody buys into the idea that there's no such things as UFOs anymore, because all you have to do is go on the internet and type in UFO, and you'll have so many pictures of them that, you know, and even if half of them are fakes and forgeries, the other half, there's something there, and of course there is. And so I find that just a very intriguing
absolutely
subject.
And, you know, okay, let's stick with the UFOs just for a moment. We will get back to remote viewing, because that's just fascinating as well. But with the UFO subjects, you know, with your religious background, how much did that take you out of your comfort zone to know that there may be multiple species out there with their own understanding of consciousness, with their own understanding of spirituality, in a sense?
Exactly. Well, I was brought up in the Southern Baptist Church, so I had a pretty constrained and narrow upbringing, but fortunately, because of my work as a journalist, and I got to see all different factions of life and all different factions of society and how things operate, and from the very most hardened scientist to the most out there woo-woo, I was able to gauge all this, and I was able to move, I think, fairly comfortably through the whole spiritual thing. I still consider myself a pretty spiritual person, but I would not claim to be a strictly religious person with a capital R, because in my study of ancient astronauts and of our history, I find that religion and finances, both of which are closely associated. After all, the one time Jesus, the Prince of Peace, actually got violent was when he threw the money changers out, right? The bankers. And were they in their banks? No, they were in the temple. So religion and finances have been the two major control mechanisms over the human race going all the way back through our recorded history. So I was able to move fairly smoothly into the idea that religion is one thing, spirituality is something else. And spirituality involves the fact that we are all energy creatures. We are beings of energy, of light, if you will. And we are trapped in these bodies, these meat sacks, okay, which give way after a period of time because of the natural wear and tear of time. And we all die at some point. But we don't truly die. Our spirits of the energy doesn't die, because even science tells us that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change form. So when our meat sacks give out, the energy form that is actually us, okay, let me give you this analogy, Kevin. In your computer, you have what they call the bytes. These little bytes, they're just little specks of energy, right? And individually, they probably don't amount to much. But collectively, when you get billions of these bytes together, then all of a sudden you've got a artificial intelligence. You've got a thinking machine that can add, subtract, and do certain calculations. And, well, we're the same way. We are each individual points of energy or light. And collectively, we form a universal mind grid, if you will, that's all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipotent, omnipresent, which pretty much fits the definition of God. But see, there are active forces trying to prevent us from this understanding, because once you understand that everything's all connected, we're connected to nature, and nature is all part of us, we're all connected to other people, the energy is all the same, and we're all energetically connected. Well then, that kind of puts the damper on why should we go around be killing each other, and fighting and warring with each other. So, but war is profitable, so they don't want us to know that.
Well, that's very true. War is profitable, and I guess, your exploration into consciousness, because of looking at the subjects like the ET phenomena, which takes you in that realm, no doubt it does, right? You'll ask most researchers that stuck with nuts and bolts research, they end up looking at the consciousness aspect, right? They have to. You can't escape it, right?
Well, you have to, because that's where it is. It's all consciousness. And what is consciousness? Just energy movement. And that's where consciousness is. It's for instance, you may or may not have read The Holographic Universe, which says that everything we perceive is not even real.
Right.
It's just what we have created, in our own
Isn't
mind.
that incredible? Absolutely. And I know the book you're talking about, and I know some of the theory as well. It's mind-blowing, but it is going in that direction, most definitely. And
yes, and science is leading us there too. When I was a young man in school, we were taught there were just, maybe perhaps 4 dimensions. The usual 3 dimensions plus they would acknowledge perhaps a 4th dimension of time. But now science tells us they're pretty certain that they've gotten up to 9 or 10 dimensions, and that actually there may be many more than that. So there we go. See, you have this whole universe. Well, let me put it this way. Here's the analogy, and this may be a bad analogy, but maybe it'll help you understand the way I see it, which is that the entire universe is like one of the old 33 1/3 RPM phonograph records, okay? And all of the grooves are all these indefinite numbers of dimensions and possibilities within the energy flow. And we as individuals, we're the needle. And wherever the needle is, that's where our reality is. But it's just a small fraction of the whole universe.
If that's the case, then maybe we can direct that needle where we want it to go. So maybe when people are brought through information that we create our reality, so be careful of your thoughts, maybe there's some truth in that.
I think there is. And actually, I got onto this early on in my journalism career because as a reporter, I would go out and, say, in the mornings and interview the president of the biggest bank in the city, and up in the tall office building in his plush accommodations, and then that afternoon I'd be out in the projects interviewing the welfare mom, and it dawned on me fairly quickly that, those two people don't live in the same reality. The reality for the bank president is one thing. The reality for the welfare mom is something else. So I've long argued that perhaps we ought to do away with the term reality, singular, and just use realities, plural.
That's so true, man. Yeah. No, I love what the truth that you're sharing right now and the transparency you're giving. I really appreciate that. For your immediate family, then.
Well, you asked me, I'm telling you, and a lot of people probably wouldn't agree with me, or go, well, what is he talking about? But I'm just telling you that I've come a pretty long way here, and I've put everything together, and I've been looking at everything as dispassionately and as objectively as I think I can. And this is what I've come up with.
You're not the only one to say this truth to me. Many others come on this show with the same truth said in different ways. So we can't all be saying the same thing, and there's not some truth in that. So.
Well, no, we can't. We actually, Kevin, we could be saying the same thing. It's just that how we approach it and what baggage we're carrying and how we perceive it. Let's say you and I and a third party are walking through the woods, and a little diminutive green figure rushes across our path and runs off into the woods. The third person might say, "Wow, I just saw an alien," and you might say, "No, I saw an angel," and I might say, "No, I saw a leprechaun." Our perceptions are a little bit different, and yet the reality is there.
Now, that's a bloody good point. That's a good point. Do you find that, and this is a bit of key, this question, but do you find that in the process of all the work and investigations that you've done into all these subjects, that actually, because you've touched the consciousness subjects as well, that you've become a bit more of that you've healed some of your deep down internal issues that you never, maybe spoke to anyone about, in a sense, that you've been healing as you go on this journey, and that actually you've become a kinder person because you've seen reality from a different perspective?
Well, yeah, that's probably true. I question the idea about healing because that implies that I started out sick or with some problem. I think I started off kind of as a babe in the woods. It was kind of like, hey, I want to know what's going on, show me, and as I've traveled along, I've been shown.
I was going to say that. What about transforming then? What about transforming some of your issues, not getting rid of?
Oh, well, my mind, my consciousness, my spirit, if you will, has been greatly expanded by my experiences and by my study and by my research, and that's why I think everyone should make sure that they're able to read well. Okay, once you're able to read well, then there is literally nothing under the sun that you can't learn and perceive correctly. But you have to study. You have to open your mind. Your mind's kind of like a parachute. It works better when it's open.
That is so true. Yes, is all I can say to, and I agree with everything you've said there as well. It's a unique journey you've been on, and I bet you've helped heal so many people. I bet by living your passion, you've opened up the eyes and hearts of people in different ways. So some people that will come to you for the conspiracy subjects has opened them up. Some people for the alien subjects have opened them up in ways that you won't know. Some people for the consciousness, and between them all, you've probably helped a lot of people that you're not even aware of.
Well, thank you for saying that. I don't know that, but I would hope that's true, and I kind of do think it's true. In fact, I try to tell people, just by living your life, you're setting an example, and other people look at you, and they see you, and they see what you do and how you act, and your personality and everything, and just by being there, you're affecting other people. It's like when you go to the pond and it's a very still, quiet day, and the pond's very still, and it's reflecting the other side. So you toss a pebble out into the pond, and these ripples come out, and they start reaching all the way from one side of the pond to the other. Now, you may have already walked away and left, but the ripples keep going, and they hit the other side of the pond, and they may cause the crane to fly off. Okay, so see, you have influenced the reality without even knowing it. And so this is what we all do. And yes, I've been very fortunate in that I have had the educational background and the opportunities to actually put down, study a lot of the various subjects, put them all together, synthesize the material, and then present it to a reading audience. But we all, just by being here, are influencing the realities around us.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing what you're sharing right now. It means a lot. It really does. So, okay, just getting back to the UFO subject as well. What is a conscious, spiritual UFO beings coming into our airspace and abducting people and all the other things that they're doing? What do you think the purpose of it all is, in a sense?
Well, in my book, Alien Agenda, I kind of come to the conclusion that they are covertly trying to kick us up the evolutionary ladder. When we set off atomic weapons in 1945, I think that by the very nature, by the very term atomic weapons, we were operating and destroying at the atomic level, and this went beyond the Earth. This sent ripples into the universe, and at this atomic and subatomic level. And I think somewhere out there, somebody said, "Oh my God, the kids found the matches," And so I think they have been trying to condition us to the idea that we are not alone in the universe, and the fact that we need to get our act together as a species, and because if we don't, we're going to end up with a very real potential, which is very real today, of atomically destroying ourselves. And I think there are intelligences out there that said this would be kind of a sad thing, because we kind of think these humans are kind of funny, they're kind of neat, and we'd hate to see that. But yet, if I think there has been an unwritten law in the universe, but not necessarily as a law as we perceive it, where there's a cop is going to come and put you in handcuffs if you violate it, but just kind of a law among the advanced intelligent species that it is not right or proper to interfere with the natural evolution of a species. So for that reason, in Star Trek they call it the Prime Directive.
Absolutely.
Are you familiar with that term? Well, then you know what I'm talking about. So there is kind of this Prime Directive. So that prevents them from simply landing and saying, "Here we are, we come in peace." So what they've been doing is they're just playing around the edges, okay? They're grabbing people here and there, taking them on trips. They tend, as far as I can tell, for the most part, they bring them back. So, this idea of abduction sounds terrible, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who had a bad experience, but yet they did come back. And so, and then we've got crop circles, and we've got animal mutilations, the animal mutilations, I think you'd agree with me, Kevin, that there's a whole lot fewer people who are overtly concerned about a few dead horses or cats or whatever than there would be if there had been dissected human beings lying all over the place, right? So they are just doing all this in a way of trying to get us on up the evolutionary ladder, but without doing it in an overt way.
What you've just said there is such an aha, yes, yes, yes. This man is on the right truth. That I'm the same truth as me, and I hope the same truth as others. That when you don't come from the fear base and you look at it from this perspective, that they're not going to shove their truth down our throat. We've got to come up to that truth ourselves. If they landed, I always say that we look upon them as gods, and they don't want that. They want us to, meet them equally.
Well, that's what happened. That's what happened
Right.
hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it still got us in problems today because that was the founding of religion with a capital R. The people from space came, and the people on the earth said, "Oh my gosh, they're gods," because they can fly and they know things, and so they didn't want to. They began to realize what a problem it would be to directly interfere with the evolution of the human species. So they appointed their hybrids or their appointees, very favored humans, to act as their representatives, and that gave rise to a priesthood and a priestly caste that is still with us today. I represent God, and God told me to tell you, here's how you're going to live. And this has caused problems right on up through
so
today.
You really do. Your truth is that most major religions, their teachings have come from something. When we say greater than us, you're talking about maybe their teachings have come from an extraterrestrial contact potentially.
I think that the evidence points in that direction. In my book, Our Occulted History, and I use the term occulted in the astronomical sense. When the moon eclipses the sun, that's an occultation. It occults the sun. It hides the sun. Okay, so our occulted history is our hidden history. When you go look at the history that you're not taught in school, you find that this third party has always been with us, and that throughout all around the world there is evidence that there was highly evolved and technological civilization on this planet long before we came along, and that all of the primitive civilizations of this planet, from the Aborigines in Australia to the certain tribes in Africa, to the Native Americans, to the Incas, to the Aztecs, to the ancient Chinese, to the ancient Hindus, they all tell of these beings who came from the sky, were able to fly around, landed, and gave them specific information and knowledge. So it's just there for anybody that really wants to look at it. But now, you have to go and study it and look at it, because you're not going to be able to turn on your TV and have somebody just tell you, here it is.
That's interesting, isn't it? I always thought that maybe Islam and Christianity, that maybe this was channeled information, in a sense, that was then distorted by mankind. But if it was channeled, was it channeled from an ET, maybe, or was it channeled from something greater than that? Was it channeled from someone else's truth, not our truth?
Well, again, Kevin, it's all one and the same. I recall interviewing a woman who was a very staunch Christian and who had experienced these, what they call the abduction thing, that she'd been taken aboard these ships and taken to other places. And she told me she kept asking them, are you from God? Do you worship God? What do you know about God? And finally she said one of them kind of looked at her and said, hey, our God is your God. And, I think that's true, because if we are pieces of the universal energy entity, then we are all part of God.
True, but look, we're never going to know. Yeah.
Now, what happens is that from that universal energetic source of truth comes some of the spiritual messages that have been passed down through the various religions. Now, the problem is passed down. When it starts in with the humans, it's like the old parlor game of you get 10 people to stand in line, and the first person whispers a sentence in the second person's ear, and then it goes all the way down the line, and by the time you get to the 10th person, it very often does not sound like the very same thing that was said originally. And this is what has happened in religion. The basic tenets are there, and they're all true and correct, but they've been manipulated, they've been edited, and they've been, for example, most of the Christians today operate off the King James Version of the Bible, which, if you'll read the flyleaf, says the Bible according to King James. Okay, didn't say it came straight from God. It said it came from King James, and nobody ever said that King James, was a direct conduit to God. And so you can imagine that if they're editing the King James Version and they get to that verse that says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, if it had actually read, do not render anything into Caesar, I think you could see where they would probably be great pressure to alter that somewhat into the translation so they could support, taxes and obedience to the king.
Yes, I mean, I never, I think when that comes through, man, such information that's come from the source, I always think, there's quite a bit of filtering that's took place there for these old religions. Not how can one book have all the truth? I mean, Christ, it takes a good bunch of ufologists to get together just to get near the truth. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And then you go back and read about, like, the Council of Nicaea, where they threw out about half the books of the Bible,
including reincarnation.
No wonder we don't know the full truth.
I think people, it's crazy. We live in a world where people will die for this truth, yet they won't die for love. And I always say to people, in any truth, how much does it come from love? And that's it.
Well, I think you'd agree with me that at its most basic, love is truth. If you love somebody, you don't lie to them, right? And in fact, I had a little thing I put together called the Spirit of Truth, and it gets into exactly what you're talking about. Most Christian religions today say if you simply believe in Jesus, you're saved and you're okay. Well, if you go back to the Old Testament, the New Testament, on 3 different occasions in Matthew and Mark and Luke, Jesus to his disciples said, you don't even have to believe in me. You can blaspheme me against me, and that can be forgiven. He said the one thing that will never be forgiven is to blaspheme against the Spirit of truth, or against the Holy Spirit. Well, what exactly is the Holy Spirit? Well, in John we find that he says that I'll bring you the great comforter, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth. In other words, there is truth. In the universe, there is truth. There is a material universe that we have to deal with, and there are planets, and on these planets there are plants, and there's animals, and there's all kinds of material things, and this is just truth. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, okay, let's take a shovel. There's a useful tool, okay, but it can be used to kill somebody, right? So the truth is the shovel. The question is, who's wielding the shovel and what is their intent?
God, yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Thank you for what you're sharing. I really appreciate it. It's so deep and it's needed right now. It really is.
Yeah, and it's what surprises me is you're one of the few people that I've done interviews with who have actually even asked me questions.
But every interviewer, I think, is on their own journey, and I think for my journey, I've had to look at the conscious side. It's been. Well, do you know what it is? I've been channeling, and because of my channeling, it's set my own truth up, and it's brought in a deeper side of me, a deeper depth. Some interviewers don't want to bring themselves in the interview. They want to, they just want it to be about the interviewer, the interviewee, sorry, and they don't want to bring their truth into it. But I think it's important to combine the both nowadays.
Right. Well, I think so, and I think that the time for subterfuge and manipulation and sidestepping is over with. I think we're into a time now where we've all got to start revealing our truths to each other, so that we can reach a agreed upon truth, so that we can operate in a more open and transparent and positive manner.
Yeah. Well, what is the answer to this? I keep saying to people that, I don't think you can change the world, but I think we can change ourselves. And by improving ourselves and changing ourselves, it's a ripple effect to other people. I think that's the most empowering thing we can do in these times right now. And by living your passion, whatever that's, is.
Right. Well, just speak your truth. And stand by your truth. But first you have to make sure that it is your truth, okay? You're not going to get too far if you're trying to defend someone else's truth, especially if that someone else's truth is not founded on reality and factual information.
That's a very important part. Yeah, very important part. Thank you for everything you've just shared there, and I hope, and I know this will help a lot of people. Just going back into the UFO subject as well, with the ancient alien theory as well. Obviously, that's something that you've covered before. Where does the ancient alien theory for you fit into the theory of where the UFO sits now, in a sense? Obviously, because that's something that people talk about quite a bit.
Well, again, I would encourage you and your listeners to read my book, Our Occulted History, because what I try to do there to see if there is a connection between the theory of ancient astronauts, in other words, non-human extraterrestrials visiting the Earth thousands of years ago, and today's Earth, where there is quite obviously and demonstrably a small clique of people, individuals, who are trying to run the world. And yes, I did find that, yes, there is a correlation, there is a connection that can be traced all the way back through the ancient mysteries, through the Knights Templars, through secret societies, through the Council on Foreign Relations, right on up to the Bilderberg Group. And I think now that it's a time that we can legitimately and seriously ask the question, are these people who are trying to run the planet, and they're obviously not doing a very good job, and they obviously do not necessarily operate on to the benefit of the human race, are they even us?
Well, that's what David Icke would ask those questions as well. Yeah,
I know. I hate to sound like David Icke, but in fact, people are constantly asking me what I think about David Icke, and I always give them my stock response, which is, I've had enough background in public relations and advertising to realize that I'm not going to win friends and too many people over by calling the Queen Mother of England a 200-year-old extraterrestrial reptilian cannibal. But on the other hand, I'm not prepared to say that he's just absolutely 100% wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I always say to people, use discernment, go with what feels right. If it feels too wacky and out of place, don't go with it. If he's done that's his research, that's his truth. And
that's his truth. And like I said, I'm not prepared to say that he's wrong. I just have to say that some of that's still in my file.
Me too. And if David was here, I'd tell him the same thing, with love, with no disrespect or anything like that. But that's exactly what I would say. Just because someone's got a massive following does not mean I have to agree with them. Yeah. Go with what feels right.
Yeah, I started to bring up a certain iconic figure that is now causing problems with about a third of the world, and that's because they're just following this person. They're not following the universal.
And I think one thing David does do is he started to bring in consciousness into his talks much more now than he ever did. Because I got to interview him a few years ago, and and that definitely is an aspect that's there now. That was great to see that side of that teaching as well. And I think whoever you are researching or following, come up with your own conclusion, come up with your own truth, and really do the don't not just do the research. But you don't have to do that, but just use that inner voice, that inner guidance that will always lead you to the right place.
That's right, and read, further your mind. They've just issued a new edition of L. Ron Hubbard's book, Battlefield Earth, which is a science fiction story about 1,000 years in the future when the Earth is occupied by these aliens and how that they fight back against it. And yet there is so many parallels that can be drawn. For example, unlike a lot of the more recent space alien movies and stuff, where like Independence Day, where they come and they're blowing up everything and they're trying to kill everybody, Hubbard writes that this was just a business deal. Intergalactic bankers loan money to the intergalactic mining company, and they get the rights to come and strip mine the mineral resources of the Earth. But, oh yeah, there is a problem with these pesky humans, so they contract out to this the planet Cyclos, so they can have these big, huge area aliens come and lord over the humans so that they can stay on their contract, because otherwise, if they don't mine the Earth in a certain period of time, it reverts back to the banks, and they're going to sell it to the highest bidder. And so it's just a business deal. And this, I think, gets very, very close to how things are truly operate today, not only in earthly politics and government, but possibly even intergalactic.
Well, that could be true. And,
government.
Whenever material, even like L. Ron Hubbard, is brought through, again, it's through L. Ron, the filter. The filter, may have its own agenda. Money is one of them, right?
Exactly.
And a following is a nice thing for the ego, right? Yeah.
Well, but see, you mentioned yourself earlier, discernment. You have to be discerning. If Adolf Hitler comes back to life and tells you the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, is he wrong because he's Hitler? You just have to take your information where you can get it, and then keep studying, keep an open mind, and then determine your own truth for yourself.
I remember reading Zachariah Stitchin's books, even though they're quite complicated in some respects, right? And the Sumerian tablets, and there's a lot of truth in that, I felt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the problem is, I think too many people read Sitchin and take him at absolute face value. Okay, here's Enki, here's Enlil, here's what they did, then they went here and they did this and they did that. We don't know. We don't know. That's been too far back. There's not that many accurate records. But I think in general, I think that is largely truthful. I think that's exactly what was going on in a general sense. But again, it's kind of like the Kennedy assassination. We may never know for certain who actually pulled the trigger and from what location and what trajectory and what shots hit where, But what we do know is the general overall truth, which was it was a coup d'etat. We know the general overall truth of the ancient astronauts is, yes, there were extraterrestrials on this planet, and they have influenced the evolution of humankind, probably through the manipulation of our DNA. This is why when I was a young man in science, the big search was hunting for the missing link between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon, or modern man. And I'm beginning to suspect that they haven't been able to find that because there is none. They took Neanderthal, they tweaked with his DNA, and they created Cro-Magnon. So there's not a direct link there because there was outside intervention.
And I think on other planets, the same process can happen. I think maybe what happened with our planet is something evolved us quicker than we should have been.
Yes. Well, I think what's happened is that, and possibly because of this extraterrestrial intervention, our technological advancement has progressed faster than our social advancement. And that's why, we have all these incredibly sophisticated modern technologies, and what are we using them for? For warfare. Instead of healing people and feeding people and, taking care of the planet.
Yep. Because it looks like, we are as we are only as far as our consciousness has evolved, aren't we, in one sense? And maybe as the near-death experiences talk about when they've come back from home or heaven, however you want to personify it, they talk about the ideas that that the soul comes down to choose experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that in past lives we've been the everything, we've been the worst, and we've been the best, and we continue to have these roles, and hence why the planet is like it is. But that doesn't mean that we can't evolve to a better way of being.
Exactly. That's why I say that the Earth basically is just a intergalactic petri dish. we're just little specimens in an experiment here, experimenting on ourselves, really. We're kind of like we're in kindergarten trying to graduate to the first
My
grade.
God, Dolores Cannon used those words as well. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, other researchers have said the same thing. Yeah, and I always say, well, we must be,
Right.
the comedy channel out there. We must be bloody funny sometimes. So,
Well, I tell the story when I was going to graduate school at Texas Tech University out in West Texas in Lubbock. Lubbock's a great place. There were some great people out there, but boy, it's nowhere. There's nothing out there. So on Saturday afternoons, back in the day, the guy would get his date and his girlfriend, and they'd go out to Prairie Dog Town. Prairie Dog Town lay on the outskirts of Lubbock, and it's just a big place where all the prairie dogs were, and you'd park out there in a line, and you'd sit up on the hood of your car or whatever on the bumper and watch the prairie dogs. And oh, they were so cute. They'd scramble all around. They'd fight with each other, and they'd love with each other, and they'd chase each other around. And that was one of the big deals, was to go look at the prairie dogs at Prairie Dog Town. So people today say, well, why are these species coming to Earth, And I tell them, well, maybe they're just coming to look at the prairie dogs.
Well, there could be more truth in that, Jim, than what people think. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, where does that lead in then to the secret space program, do you think?
Well, apparently there's some still conflict going on even outside the Earth. I could go into several different narratives that ended up saying, with people getting the message that we're in a covert war type situation. And of course, we do have some knowledge, such as the STS-48 tape from the space station that shows apparently somebody shooting at UFOs. We do know that early on back in the 50s, shoot down orders were issued for UFOs. If you see one, shoot it down. But then after a series of mysterious air crashes that killed several military aviators and military aircraft were lost, they said, okay, don't shoot at them, and then all of a sudden these air crashes stopped. So I think there has been some conflict going on. Of course, you're not going to read about this in your newspaper or on your networks, TV, but so I think that is going on, and I think that this has to do, again, with who's going to try to gain control over the Earth. But the factions that are fighting over who's going to gain control over the Earth have to do it surreptitiously. They can't just come out in the open. That's why truth and love today is so important, because that's the only thing that's going to get us through. Because today everything is just subterfuge, lies, deceit. We're being told all kinds of stories from all different sides and from all different factions, and many of whom actually believe it because this is what they were told. In other words, I noticed working with police department and the police, if police are just like little old ladies in one respect, and if one cop tells another cop something, he just automatically believes it because it came from another cop. Just like the little old ladies gossiping, they heard it from Aunt Susie, so it's got to be right. And yet it gets propagated on through our whole society, to where whole factions, large factions of people believe things that are simply not true.
Well, that's a very good point, and also that probably leads on to as well disclosure. I mean, I always feel that in my lifetime, I mean, I'm 38 now, that I'm never going to see disclosure. Maybe we are the disclosure by me and you having this conversation.
Excuse me, Kevin, but you've already seen it. It's already happened. Okay. It's just that I think, you're not asking the right question. If you say disclosure's already here. The national polls show that the vast majority of people today, 85% or more, now believe there is life outside the Earth, and they're willing to accept that, okay? So, see, disclosure's here. What you're actually asking is, will there be a day when some government official will stand up at a big national press conference and say, okay, we've lied to you for 75 years. Here's the truth. Here's the truth about aliens and space. No, that I don't think that's going to happen. You're correct about that. But as far as the knowledge of the fact that we're not alone, and the knowledge that this stuff's going on, it's all out there. You have to go find it. you can't turn on the TV or open up the newspaper and have somebody tell it to you because they're under too tight control.
Right. Yeah, no, that's yeah, absolutely. And I know we're all over the place here, but just one thing I wanted to ask you as well is that you talked about this earlier on about the remote viewing. Yeah. Obviously, you know, with remote viewing, I'm sure they remote viewed, you know, not just, you know, the assassination of JFK and all other things, but UFOs and aliens as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's another thing. In my research for my book on psychic remote viewing, what I finally determined is that every one of these government-trained remote viewers who are able to go out and see things out even into the universe with their minds, each and every single one of them had direct knowledge and experience of the UFOs. They know they're real. Now, all of them won't talk about it. Some of them won't talk about it at all. Some of them will talk about it only in a very guarded manner, and some are pretty open about it. But all of them had the same experience. So this means that there is a reality there.
Yeah, that's so true. There really is something in this remote viewing. It really works, and it's a real phenomena.
Yeah. But the thing is, we all have this ability. It's innate within us. You or some of your listeners may have had the experience of where you're going through your day and all of a sudden you think, hey, my mom's going to call. And a few minutes later the phone rings, it's your mom. You know, we have this innate ability. But then that's like saying that you and I can have the innate ability to play Chopin on the piano. Well, yes, we kind of do, but I guarantee you, in the way things are right now, unless you play the piano, or if you play the piano, you can undoubtedly play Chopin better than I can, because I don't play the piano. But my point is that both of us, you and I, Kevin, if we were to take lessons and practice, yes, we could play Chopin on the piano.
That's so true. And that's always been my point when talking about the consciousness subjects, that we all have the ability to have the answers that we're looking for by going within through meditation, going within in meditation and asking questions through just that quiet side. Even myself, that channels, right? You know, if I don't, and I haven't, you know, if you don't keep at it, you know, you become rusty at it in a sense. It's like anything. But I do think
true. You have to keep up at it. It's kind of like flying an airplane. Once you take flight lessons, you know how to fly. You need to stay up with it and stay competent. Because if you go 6 months, a year, and you don't fly, then it's almost like starting all over.
So true.
Again.
But there was one young lady I got on recently. 22 years old. She was Aniama Kamarik, right? If I've got the name right. And she was a child prodigy that came on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and she paints. And this painting ability is something of someone very, very special. This gift came to her at 7 or 8 years old. She was doing it. So some of us are even, you know, I'm sure she channels it. I'm sure it's coming through her higher self. Yeah, that aspect of her that's left over. And my point is that, you know, some of us are great painters, some of us are not so great painters, just what you were saying about having to learn. But some of us, what I'm saying is, we're born into this life with this ability, maybe from a past life, maybe.
Exactly. And some people do it naturally better than others. You know, that's very true. I've got to issue you a slight warning though about channeling, because in my research of psychic ability and remote viewing, what I learned is that there is a danger in channeling as opposed to remote viewing. In remote viewing, you sit down, you get in a meditative state, you cast your mind out, and you go and you look at things mentally, okay? So you are like a third-person observer. You're not actually involved in anything. You're just looking to see what's going on. Channeling, on the other hand, is when you open yourself up to some other entity to come into your space, so to speak, and then speak with you, learn through you, and all like that. Now, that's not to demean the activity of channeling. It's just a warning that when you open yourself up, you have no real guarantee as to who or what's coming through. And there are certain spirits, certain entities that are treacherous and deceitful, And like, for example, if you decided you want to sit down and you wanted to channel Adolf Hitler, okay, well, there could be some malicious spirit that comes along and says, oh, that's me, here, I'm Hitler, what do you want to know? See what I'm saying? So you have to guard yourself against being taken in by subterfuge.
I always say that whatever comes through the channeling, if it's coming from love, then I would always say go with it, because love is the only answer, really. That's what we're here to learn, to love ourselves. And also, if that love energy is coming through, then it won't have any negative qualities to it. That's what I always say. And one thing I don't always do is that I don't always cover myself with white light. I've got to this procedure now where I walk through a door and then I'm connected in a sense, right? Even though there's a doubting Thomas in there all the time, right? It's still,
right.
Which.
Right, but I think that's always good to have a little dose of healthy
skepticism. Yes, absolutely. If I didn't do it and ignored it, it would be. I would always say to myself, well, what could it have brought through that could have helped others, not just myself, right? But I do hear you, and that is. But I don't know anyone that I know that channels that brings that through. But I think when you but actually saying that, I have seen some others channel, and when they channel, it can. This has only happened with I'm not going to name names, but it did seem a little bit negative. And also, what it does to the channeler is it makes them very ill, and that to me is not. It shouldn't make you so tired. It shouldn't, and also another thing with the channeling, I'm just going to say this, is that there's a new paradigm that's come through. I'm meeting new paradigms of channelers where they're not changing the voice, they're not changing the persona. It's them. It's coming through the higher self. They're even able to keep their eyes open in a sense. It's almost conscious channeling. It's what I term as channeling your higher self. And I think any channelers of the past really, were they channeling something separate, or was it just their higher self and they masked it just because they didn't want to be responsible for what was coming through because they didn't?
Well, what is your higher self anyway, except maybe the conduit to the universal energy grid? So again, we're talking semantics here. You say, well, they're channeling a higher source, or they're talking to their higher self. Well, it's still yourself.
Of course, but you do bring up a good point, and I would never, say, oh, well, I don't agree with it. No, that is a good point, and that is true. So, thank you for sharing that as well. What would you say then? What would you say is an important message of your work?
I guess right off the top of my head, I'd say don't take anything at face value. Don't believe just anything. So keep an open mind and look at all sides of an issue, study it thoroughly, and then go to that higher self and see if it resonates with positivity, love, or fear, negativity, and then start making up your own mind. Make up your own mind about things. Unfortunately, today you hear people, they say, well, we're all just sheep. And unfortunately, to a certain extent, that's true. Because so many people, they just don't think, and they don't go within, and they don't try to seek truth. They just turn on the TV, and whatever they absorb, to them, that's the truth. And yet, usually, it's sometimes the exact opposite.
Yeah. I would say that's so powerful what you've said there, and I think this is probably for you. This has been a very alternative interview, but I appreciate hearing your alternative side. I just wanted to do something different with this interview, and I've really appreciated you sharing your truth. I think this interview was more powerful than I even could have imagined, and I really appreciate that, Jim.
Well, thank you. And hey, this is all your deal. You're the one that brought up all these subjects. Usually on interviews, I just wherever they want to talk about the Kennedy assassination, want to talk about UFOs, want to talk about the world situation, Putin or Obama or Trump. I'm willing to talk about anything. But hey, you're the one that brought it up, and I think this has been a very, very far-reaching discussion. And I hope a good number of people are able to listen to this and maybe provoke some thinking within themselves.
Most definitely. Well, God, I'd love to spend a day in the life of Jim Mars just to be in your company and learn from you. I really would. Who knows? Maybe one day. Well, look, Jim Mars, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a distinct honor and pleasure.